Okay, so in a follow-up to our chapter on the budget, we're going to talk about economic policy making and kind of an overview. And there will be some overlap with what we talked about on the budget, but some other points to be made as well. So government and the economy. Obviously, um, capitalism is the basis of the American economy, and it's an economic system in which individuals and corporations own the principal means of production and the profits, right? But it's also based primarily on the idea that individuals are self-interested, right? So if individuals are self-interested, then they will pursue the best price and the best deal for themselves. And if everyone is pursuing that, there'll be competition and capitalism to innovate and provide um, new sources of revenue to other people so that individuals can reap the benefit of that. And entrepreneurs establish new areas of the economy, um, and goods and services are exchanged based on what the market will bear, right? And the market's not controlled by the government in a capitalist system. So we have a capitalist system primarily. A mixed economy is different. In a mixed economy, and it's an economic system in which the government is deeply involved in economic decisions through its role as regulator, consumer, subsidizer, taxer, employer, and borrower. So there are elements of a mixed economy in our economy as well, um, because often tax ramifications come into the picture when business decisions are being made. Government regulation comes into the picture as well, but the primary basis is capitalism. So it's obviously different than kind of a centrally run economy like they have in China. It does have more capitalistic um, elements, and that's partly of why China has taken off. But at the same time, it's heavily regulated by the central government in China, much more than we can imagine over here. Is the economy stupid? So when Bill Clinton ran against George H.W. Bush, right? George H.W. Bush had been in office for one term, so he was running for a second term against Bill Clinton, and the economy was not doing very well. And as the Clinton campaign team that first time around tried to formulate how to attack George H.W. Bush to win the election, several other advisors came up with the idea that, hey, it's really, the people are just really concerned about the economy, and it's the recession that's driving voters here. So they came up with the slogan, it's the economy stupid, amongst themselves, and they really just pushed um, how the economy was not doing as well, and they felt like a change would be necessary to help the economy flourish. Um, so there are elements that economic trends affect who voters vote for. So if the economy is not doing well when the president comes up for re-election or there's a midterm election, voters will often blame the president and the president's party for the poor performance in the economy and will punish them by not voting as many into office. Um, Conversely, if the economy is doing well, that will be a boost to the president in the midterms or in the general election. A lot of times people are primarily evaluating the president based on how well the economy is perceived to be doing. But keep in mind, a lot of most people are not economists, right? So their experience with the economy is either going to be firsthand, where they can't get a job and they find it very difficult, so they have firsthand knowledge of the challenges of the economy, or they're getting their information, filtered through media sources about how the economy is either doing good or bad. And the question would be, are those media sources biased, and are they giving a true picture? Republicans worry about inflation, Democrats worry about unemployment. The unemployment rate is measured on a constant basis, and this is measured by the people that are actively seeking work but unable to find jobs. So the unemployment rate is people seeking work but not able to find jobs. It does not count the people who just don't have jobs and are not actively seeking, right? So when the recession hit, the true number of the unemployed, both those actively seeking jobs who couldn't find them and those who were unemployed but had given up seeking jobs, was much higher than the unemployment rate that was quoted at the time, right? But in general, that's what they're measuring. They're measuring people actively searching for work, and they do that through various things. In order to get unemployment, if you've lost your job, you can apply for unemployment benefits through the local work office, and they'll supply those to you as long as you continue to actively seek a job. So they keep numbers on that, and you've got to send in resumes so many times. And if you don't get a job, then you keep getting your benefits. Inflation. This is the amount that prices increase across the board for a number of consumer goods in any given year. So each year has its own rate of inflation, right? So eggs will go up because of the bird flu issue in Iowa. Gas prices play into that. And so gas prices are low, eggs are high, but eggs are in a lot of different things. So you'll see the rate of inflation go up a little bit because of the eggs. There's a whole host of factors that can play into the inflation rate, the rate of interest that's currently in the market, how well the economy is doing, are wages increasing, those kind of things. And all of that impacts how much inflation has gone up, meaning that the dollar that you had last year can't buy as much as the dollar that you had last year can buy more than the dollar that you had this year. Sorry, because the dollar that you had last year, prices have increased between last year and this year, and so the dollar that you have today can't buy as much stuff. The dollar you had in 2014 could buy more things, but since prices have increased over the last year, that means your actual dollar, it's the same dollar sitting there, can't buy as much stuff. So that's why they talk about investing and having things that, if you have investments in things that keep growing with the economy, right? So they grow at the same time the economy grows. Then the hope is you'll be able to have the same kind of purchasing power. Consumer price index is just a key of what prices are, and as those go up, that keys into the rate of inflation. The unemployment rate got to 10% in the Great Recession, right? And again, that's just the people that are unemployed but actively seeking work. The true unemployment rate, if you add in the people that were unemployed, but and were employable, they weren't completely incapable of working because of physical handicap or mental handicap. If you count all the whole people that were not actively seeking, it was much higher, right? Some say 15% or something like that. In the Great Depression, it got to 25%, right? 20% range. So a quarter of Americans didn't have jobs in the Great Depression, which is why that was really bad. The underemployment rate means that yes, you're employed, but you're not employed up to the skill level, or you're not a full-time employee or something like that, right? So you have skill levels to be a full-time employee. You're either employed at a part-time job or you're taking a job that doesn't fully employ you to your skill level. And all of that's tracked by the Bureau of Labor Statistics. Inflation averages 4% a year, right? So each year, prices across the board for many things go up by about 4%. Sometimes you see it at the grocery store, sometimes you see it in other areas, but usually it goes up by about 4%. And here's just a chart of the unemployment rate, over the years. Obviously, this is only till 2002, and then you'd have in the Great Recession that we looked at, 2008 2008 to 2010, that range you're going to be in the 10%. And so a drastic uptick to the levels that we saw in the early 1980s there in 1982. This is the inflation index, right? It shows the percentage of inflation that we had. And in the 70s, we were really fighting inflation, right? And it's still not as bad now. And a lot of people, the inflation has been kept relatively under control so far, but people are still concerned about it spiking up. Monetary policy in the Fed. So the Fed prints money, right? So the Fed puts out dollar bills out into the money supply, right? But if the Fed prints too much money or and puts too much more money into circulation than is actually there, that produces inflation, right? Because then the businesses and companies say, well, geez, there's this much more money in the system, then we can charge more, right? So just printing more money, why don't we just print more money and then we'll have more money? Just printing more money means that the cost goes up, right? So in Zimbabwe, Africa, they recently switched to the dollar, and in Zimbabwe, it was like 100 million Zimbabwe currencies, just a million one of those for $1, right? So the exchange rate was a million Zimbabwe currencies, and I don't remember the name of it right now, but a million of those to $1. And the reason is inflation got so bad in Zimbabwe because of the problems with the economy. The amount of money out there also affects the interest rate paid. The Fed also sets interest rates, right? So the cost of borrowing money. So if I borrow something from you and you charge me interest, the more, just like we saw in the student loans, the more interest you charge, the higher the cost is to me to borrow that money. Now think if you're a major corporation, you're borrowing billions and millions to do things all the time. The cost of borrowing that becomes incredibly important. So if the Fed has set interest rates at a low rate, that means there'll be a lot more borrowing, a lot more money in the system. And so then once there's more borrowing and money in the system, the goal would be to keep inflation down. So the Fed has different instruments to influence the supply of money. They can set discount rates, reserve requirements, the amount of money that banks have to keep in reserve, right? That they can't lend out or that they always have to have on hand. They can count and control the amount of government bonds that are sold. So all these things, when you talk about the government raising money and selling bonds, all these things, the Fed controls that. So the Fed has been very active in trying to reverse the effects of the Great Recession and keep the economy going, right? So they had some situations where they put a lot of money into the system to help with credit and other things. And so now they're wanting to ease back on that and not do as much on it. And so the hope is that that won't increase inflation. Fiscal policy, so Keynesian economics versus supply side economics. So fiscal policy is just the impact of the federal budget on the economy. And Keynesian economic theory says that government spending and deficits help the economy, whether it's normal ups and downs, right? So if you can always count on the government as being a big spender, then you always have, you know, if people are always buying billion-dollar planes for the military or, you know, lots of spending a lot of money on defense budgets, then at least one segment of the economy, these defense contractors, know that no matter what, they're always going to have some spending there, right? Other parts of the economy are the same way, right? If the government is spending and there's deficits, then we can at least count on that aspect of the economy, regardless of ups and downs. So it's government's job to increase the demand of goods by spending on those goods and incentivizing people to go out and buy those goods. So supply side policy says that there's too much taxes. So if the government taxes to take the money to then spend or redistribute on things, right? Um, the supply side would say, um, rather than taking the money and taxing it and taking the money out of individuals and giving it to government to do all the spending, right? What should happen is there should be less taxes so that individuals can do that same kind of spending um, on goods and services more so than the government, right? Because people can be more efficient and it's the people's money, right? Um, so they think the more that you reduce taxation and shrink the size of government, less regulation, less taxation, and then people will be incentivized to work harder, um, spend more because they get to keep more of it, right? They're not having to turn more of it over to the government. So we talked about these in the budget. You have Social Security and Medicare. These are the largest and most expensive expenditures that the government does. You have kind of the welfare types of policies. You have food stamps and Medicaid. There's always the fear that people will become dependent on. These are only seen to be temporary things as you gradually gain the skills of get back into the economy and become employed or those kind of things. But there's always the fear that people are going to become dependent on those. Types of taxation. So progressive taxation says that if you don't make as much um, money, right, you should be taxed at a lower rate. So the less money you make, the lower rate of tax you have, right? As you start to make more money, the higher rate of tax you are going to have, right? And so currently our tax system is a progressive system in that the more money you make on an annual basis, the higher your income tax is, okay? If you make less, you don't pay as much in the rate of taxes. Proportional taxation means that you're taxed in proportion to what you have, right? A regressive tax is the reverse of a progressive tax. A regressive tax means that if you make less, you pay more, right? And so a lot of people see like increase on the gasoline tax as a regressive tax because it taxes people who make less. Um, Government expenditures, again, we have transfer payments, Social Security, unemployment, food stamps, tax deductions. We talked about that in the last class. And here's just the major welfare programs. Um, Medicare Part A, Medicare Part B, and now we have Medicare Part D is the prescription drug benefit. Unemployment insurance, that's where if you get fired, then you can get your benefit payments as long as you're actively seeking work. Social Security kicks in when you can elect it in your 60s. Medicaid, so Medicaid and Medicare are different. Medicare is health care, health insurance when you get to be in your 60s. All right, and so persons over 65 and retired and disabled people get Medicare Part A, and so you have to be elderly to get Medicare. Medicaid you can get at any time, but it's based on the number of assets that you have in your income. Okay, and so that's like the health insurance for the very poor. Food stamps, the same thing. You have to qualify for that under an income test. TANF, again, these are programs for welfare programs. That's supposed to be temporary for families with children. SSI is just a direct income payment. Again, if you have very low income or disabled, and then CHIPS and insurance and stuff like that for children. One of the big changes during the Clinton administration, and one that both Clinton and the Republican Congress worked for, and was a major success for, by the estimation of most, was the complete reform of welfare in '96. And so it left the welfare system, states would run their own programs, benefits would be limited to a 2-year benefit. Now, during the Great Recession, unemployment benefits insurance kept getting extended out and out and farther and farther. Be a lifetime maximum of 5 years on welfare, and they switched from um, families of dependent children to TANF, right? So there was a new program, and the old program was taken out. The reforms were seen as effective, right? We spent less, there was less people on it, and the budget was not as hampered by welfare. So it was really seen as a positive move. Controlling the economy. So a lot of people, it's kind of like, um, some would say coaches get unfair credit when their teams win, or unfair blame when their teams lose. Presidents and the economy. The president doesn't directly control the economy in any way, right? But people often think that, well, the president's got some kind of control, the economy's not doing a good job. But there are things that are bigger than the president going on that the president can't control of in the economy. Um, benefits, a lot of benefits in the area of welfare and stuff are indexed. Um, just the market at the time the president's in place, right? Bill Clinton was the beneficiary of the internet becoming developed, right, in the later '90s, right? Well, that opened up a tremendous amount of commerce, and we're still kind of beneficiaries of that, right? Now we have the Great Recession um, at the end of George W. Bush's term and into Obama's term. Um, and so, both parties, it shows it doesn't matter, both parties, bad economic things can happen and good economic things can happen. And that's just a market economy based on the timing. So government can set the rules of the game, and out of the Great Recession, there's more regulations in the area of mortgage lending and that kind of thing to help prevent what happened in the Great Recession. Regulations and subsidies by the government. So the government is trying to regulate and prevent kind of the Bernie Madoff scandal was a pyramid scheme where he touted that he was making real investments and getting real returns. So if you invested 100,000 and he got you 5% return, that meant you got $5,000 in 2015, right? Well, he would get returns of like 10 to 20% every year, and people just thought he was an investing genius or something. But what was really going on is he would get you to invest your 100,000, and then the next year you'd get paid $10,000 and you got a 10% return. And you'd think, well, how's he able to do this when everybody else is struggling to make many returns in the Great Recession, right? And he kept doing that year on year. Well, what he was doing was you'd invest your 100,000 in the first year. Well, he'd take your 100,000 and he'd pay it out to other people up the pyramid, right? So you weren't really getting a return on your investment. He was just taking your money and paying it to other people who were already in the pot. And then as he added more people to the pot, more money to the pot, he would pay that out to other people too and show returns. And so that's tremendous. It's completely illegal and fraudulent. And government is supposed to kind of figure those things out, but they didn't until eventually they did figure it out, but the thing had come crashing down by then. And so also in the mortgage lending process, right, there was a lot of fraud going on in the mortgage lending process that wasn't being caught, but everybody was making money. And again, if you're regulating yourselves, because you used to be on one side, you used to be on the mortgage lending side, now you're the one regulating the mortgage lenders, but you still have friends over there, right? You're not likely to be as hard on people since everybody's kind of making money and the economy is going good. But if you're not vigilant on that kind of stuff and on that regulation, and people don't like it when deals get done, when regulators kill deals either, right? But if you don't do that kind of stuff, eventually you're going to have a collapse because the fraud isn't real. So the government kind of regulates things on those things. And it's hard to regulate multinational corporations who are now, a lot of multinational corporations will base themselves in countries with low tax rates. And since a lot of it is now internet based, they shift and say, oh, well, we're now a Irish company or a Norwegian company, or something like that have low corporate tax rates, or somewhere in the Caribbean or something to try and get around U.S. tax rates. And so there's a constant fight over that as well. Regulating antitrust policy means you just can't have a monopoly, right? The railroads tried to have a monopoly. That was busted up with Teddy Roosevelt and some of those things. Antitrust cases are long to try and prove that someone has a monopoly on something. The Securities and Exchange Commission regulates stock fraud. Government bailed out AIG, as we talked about in our review of the Great Recession. They can loan businesses money. They can provide direct subsidies. They can bail them out. They bailed out a lot of the auto industry as well, right? And the auto industry has come back and it's been a major success story. When the auto industry was really looking to be in rough shape. The consumer lobby is just consumer groups, and historically they had little protection, right? There started to be some more things in the progressive era around the turn of the 20th century and the early 1900s when we started labeling medicine and outlawing drugs and those kind of things, labeling food and inspecting food. And so you see there, and it was created in 1913, and it regulates all that stuff. And it's grown and grown today, right? It's still hard to get. You have the free rider problem, right? But they look into a lot of drug approvals, food approvals. It's the very important thing to try and regulate the things before they get into our stores for us to buy. Historically, government has sided more with capital. So businesses are referred to the boss, the person that has the money, is referred to as capital. Labor are the workers. Government historically sided with business over labor. Um, the National Labor Relations Board and NLRB helps sort out conflicts between labor and management. So they kind of are, they settle issues between them. Collective bargaining is the idea that a union can bargain for its workers as a whole to improve pay and stuff like that. Um, Taft-Hartley Act allows the president to stop a strike, um, and state right to work laws forbid requirements that workers have to join a union. And government sets the minimum wage and unemployment insurance. The area of unions is an interesting one because a lot of unions, for a long time, workers and unions and pensions just kept getting larger and larger and larger, especially for public workers or workers in factories, right? When the recession hit, everyone realized that we're not going to be able to be competitive um, with, you know, Asia primarily if we have to pay, tremendous pensions to our former workers and pay for all their health care and have all those costs tied up in former workers without benefits to really give our current workers. We're paying kind of for past performance, and we can't pay as much for good help with current performance. Meanwhile, in China or Asia, they're not having to pay any of those costs, right? So all the labor and the factory jobs move over to Asia because ours are too expensive, and people started to realize some of that, and so unions have lost some of their power, right? Um, because we can't stay competitive if unions get everything that they want, given that the globalization of the economy. So the new economy, right? It's, as we said, it's more tech-based, and so we want as much as we can in terms of information technology to be happening in the United States, because that's where the economy is going, right? So if we're going to have immigration, we want, high tech knowledge people to immigrate to the United States and live here, and be entrepreneurs and improve the economy. And it's also shifted more international, right? We have an international focus on a lot of our goods. So one question is, we talked about as the economy expands, right? The argument is, well, in order for business or in order for business to probably be regulated, then the government has to expand right along with the economy. Because if you have a small government and a large economy, the small government's never going to be able to regulate the large economy, so the government has to grow, right? Well, there's consequences to democracy that we talked about in this class with a large government. Um, and so um, demands for government action to regulate government or business as it grows have increased. And so when the size of the government increased, some of those economic freedoms and the free market are lost as government regulation comes in. And so the classic label is that liberals are typically more comfortable with government regulation as because they see it setting more of a playing field, whereas conservatives see it more as a costly kind of enterprise, an obstacle to get around and reduce, right? So the conservatives would say less regulation, kind of the supply side idea, less regulation will lead to more money for everyone to enjoy, because we're not spending so much of it on um, satisfying government regulators. And I think that that's wasted money. Liberals would say it's not wasted money because that keeps the playing field fair.